Welcome to the Startup Hiring Podcast. I'm Simon. I'm a recruiter of nearly 20 years, 10 of which have been in helping early stage startups hire smarter, faster, and with more clarity. This show is about how startups actually build great teams. And I'm talking about the messy human side of hiring that doesn't always make it into the glossy blog posts. You're going to hear from founders, first hires, and the people shaping what startup world looks like today, including how AI is changing the shape of teams, redefining roles, and I guess forcing all of us to rethink what good work really means. This show is no fluff, no gurus, just honest conversation, practical insights, and hopefully the occasional sharp take. So, look, thanks for letting me into your ears if you're listening on a podcast of your choice, into your eyeballs if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and let's make a start. This episode with Paul Perrett is, for me, it's an absolute treat. Paul is the former CFO of Aconex, a early stage business that he joined here in Melbourne that exited for about $1.6 billion to Oracle. He then moved to Message Media, which is where I met him. I was in the hiring team at Message Media, and he was CEO, came on board initially as a CFO, moved into a CEO role, and led Message Media to a $1.7 billion exit. So we could call him the $1 billion man. He may like that. He may not. I don't know. What I really liked about this conversation with Paul is that despite all the success that he's had, and look, he's someone who could quite easily put his feet up on the beach and not have to do much for the rest of his life. But he's chosen to kick off another business, his company Firmable, which is a B2B SaaS database for GTM teams. What I love about his approach is that he's not lost sight of the fact that people are still at the heart of good quality teams and the importance that hiring plays in assembling great teams. I really liked his points as well around AI and how startup teams are probably going to be able to find product market fit with smaller teams, probably a lot quicker if they're hiring the right people. And he talks about AI natives a fair bit in this podcast. So I'm hoping you enjoy this one. Leave your comments. Please subscribe if you like this sort of thing. When you subscribe, it helps me to bring on more high quality guests. So all the best. Thank you and enjoy. Very well, my friend. Absolute pleasure to see you again. A little while since we've, I think, seen each other in person, but an absolute pleasure. You've scaled multiple B2B tech companies, Aconex, Message Media, and obviously now you're leading Firmable. Tell me, what's it like taking a business through that sort of growth, and how's your view on hiring evolved over the years?
It's half an hour of it. There's a half an hour diatribe right there. So, look, I maybe take the first bit. I think you've got to like the journey. And I think different people are motivated and driven by different parts of the journey, which I think is healthy and good. I've always been motivated and driven by building things. It's less about, some people it's about winning, and lots of people have lots of different, but I'm motivated by building. Like, I just enjoy building, and I enjoy going on a journey and building with people, which I think it's hard, like often really hard. And it often, you have days, weeks, months, quarters where things feel like going that way, but then it's really only when you step back from it and look in the rearview mirror and go, oh wow, actually this is where we've come from, whether that's what's still a very early stage startup like Firmable or Message Media, which was a multi-billion-dollar business. Like, in all those scenarios, you're building, and you're just trying to make the business that a little bit better every day, every week, every month, which I think then is how I think about hiring too, in a way. Like, it's part of, how do you build the team that can build the business and build the group of people who are going to go on the journey with the business, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's a bit of philosophy.
So it's sounding like you enjoy particularly with Firmable, the early stage challenge of, is this idea something that people will buy? Can we get product market fit? Is this solving a real problem for people? And then once you get to that point, then how do you get the growth?
Yeah, 100%.
And in your experience, what's the biggest misconception that sort of startup founders and leaders have about building their commercial sales team? I know you've got a relatively lean team at the moment, but growing those functions around marketing and sales, what's the biggest misconception you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception often is, oh, why don't we just go and get someone who's done it before?
Yeah.
And a lot of the hiring mistakes I've made over the years, I think have been when that was pushed down to me by a board or by other people, or when I defaulted to that sometimes. I think particularly in the startup journey, and I think particularly now, like, I actually think it's changed so rapidly in the last couple of years. Like, it's just really clear people who are AI native and those who are not. And that doesn't necessarily matter in all roles, but in some
mm,
roles it
mm.
really matters. So I think it's being able to go a little bit first principles. Okay, what is it we need in this role? And
Yeah,
hey, yeah, just because X might have done something before, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person for this role. And we've seen that actually interestingly play out in Firmable, just as
right.
we think about how we build the team, what type of
Mm,
experiences, background, and particularly as a startup, your go-to-market's evolving. There's so many things that are moving around you. I
mm,
think
mm.
understanding what are the right attributes you need to be successful in a certain environment takes a little bit of first
Yeah,
principles thinking, I think.
yeah. And what do you think those attributes are for an early stage business like yours?
Clearly, you've got to be like, so one of the things that I think, so there's lots and lots of answers there, right?
Yeah,
So one of the things that I really look for and value is people who can come in and help shape the environment around them. So, say in a sales context, it is people who can come in and are able to go think about the engagement
yeah,
and start to go recognize patterns and start to
mm,
go, actually, we should do more of this and less of
yeah,
that. Or actually, what we've realized is who experiment and who are curious and who can help build the collective kind of knowledge bank of the playbook and what
mm,
made successful. So it's people who are curious, can think, can synthesize,
mm,
and can contribute to knowledge and pattern recognition,
yeah,
as opposed to people who come in and go, okay, how do you want me to sell? Okay,
yeah,
well, yeah, yes, we have some ideas, but we
yeah,
also want a group of people who, and a culture where we're collectively working that out together. I think
mm,
so. I think that's, and look, and that probably applies in all businesses, but I think it's particularly acute in startups.
yeah. When you don't have time for disagreements about how things need to happen or assuming a certain way is gonna take you home, that adaptability and the
Hmm,
ability
100%,
to
100%.
understand because the customer ultimately drives what
Yeah,
you need to
yeah, yeah,
do. If customer
yeah.
feedback is X and you're focused on helping on doing Y, then you're never gonna say anything, are you? Yeah. And then you've led teams through various stages of growth. Are there the traits that are more suited to more established business than an early stage business? Can people grow and evolve through those?
Yeah, I think 100%, like 100%. And I think one of the things, particularly as you get more senior, one of the things you've got to really avoid doing is pigeonholing people a little bit.
Right.
Sometimes you go, oh, X has only done that, therefore they
Hmm.
can't do that,
Yeah.
which is, or I work with X in a startup, oh, they wouldn't be good because this is a much bigger business. And then you
Yeah.
go, actually, I haven't worked with X for 4 years. So
Yeah.
they're probably actually,
Mm.
I think there's a lot of fun stuff that's probably changed in both of our lives. So I think you absolutely can. I think one of the things, though, people need to, I think a large part of being in startup land is understanding what you enjoy.
Yeah.
So certain personalities,
Mm.
types, I
Mm.
think, are
Mm.
more suited to startups. And sometimes it's a life stage too, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been through periods where you're like, you know what, I just, for whatever reason, I might not have the energy or the motivation or the risk profile or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's being a little bit honest with yourself about what you enjoy, what energizes you, because if
Mm.
you're being energized and you're energizing others, that's really important. So I
Yeah.
think, so to answer your question, I think it's less an attribute. Do you have the attributes to do it? I think it's
Mm.
often, is it something that you enjoy? Is it right for you at that moment? Does it suit where you are?
Yeah.
There's a few things that play out, I think. So,
Yeah. And so I think that there's also this thing of from the founder or early stage team's perspective, again, to your point, being really clear about the outcomes that you need
mm,
from the role. What's our next major milestone? Is it we're gearing up for a raise? Is it we're trying to hit a certain number of users and being really
launching
clear
into,
about what you're trying to do?
yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I really enjoy about being part of a smaller organization.
Mm,
Yeah, like
mm,
everyone can be really aligned around one thing and you can feel
yeah.
really all connected to it,
Mm,
which when you're a 500-person organization, that's just harder.
yeah. Do do only people who've worked in early growth businesses, early stage businesses suit other early stage businesses?
No, no, I don't think so. And I guess there's some people who are coming in as new graduates,
Yep.
right? And you don't know what you like or
Mm,
don't like.
mm,
And
mm.
but no, I don't think, and particularly in Australia, I think it's not like we've had this deep and rich ecosystem of startups for 20 years.
Mm.
So you get this in other markets, you get a lot of people who are serial. I come in and I do this at a startup that it's a series A. Like you don't really
Yep.
have that in Australia. So I think, which is really good. I think it means that I think there is more opportunities for people. Oh, well, to flip the question around a little bit, it's if I'm not in startups, is it is it feasible for me to want to get a role? or to transition into that environment, 100%. And I think probably in some ways it might be easier in Australia than other markets, just
Right.
because the economy and the talent pool and the set of companies is just that much smaller. I think often companies have to be a bit more open-minded on who they try. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think you have to be honest about what you enjoy, what your motivations are, and all of that kind of stuff. But I think if you really want to, you can.
Yeah. One of our prior guests talked about the amount of things that you'll learn over time in an early
Mm,
stage businesses because you're focusing on different things, maybe not just in your swim lane. You're now maybe running support or you're on customer calls or you're whatever it is. He described it as almost like a ghetto MBA. You'll learn
yeah.
so much without having the piece of paper.
Yeah, I think it's funny if I was having a discussion with my son who's at university and actually does some work at firm, which is awesome. I said, he was like, well, how should I think about joining a startup versus a bigger organization? And
Mm,
it was a good question. And the, I said, "Y- to your point, I think you can just get accelerated. Like you can be in a startup environment, it's a bit of a hothouse, right? Like
yep.
you get asked to do things you wouldn't normally get asked to do in a bigger organization.
Yep.
You have opportunities to do things. Like if you put your hand up and have the capability to do something, you can end up doing stuff you wouldn't dream of, right?
Mm,
So that's, but again, that suits. So that's, I think that's the positive side to it. I
mm,
think the negative side or the kind of the flip to it is that can be great, but you need to be someone who's comfortable in that environment a little bit. And so that's
yep.
kind of one.
Yep.
And don't discount. I spent the first 2 years of my career at a top tier strategy consulting firm, and that's kind of the opposite in a sense that yes, you get it's heavily structured and you get taught, and they know how to bring people along the journey. Whereas you might go into a startup environment and your manager doesn't necessarily know that. The startup environment might not, the team culture might not be right, so it can be
Yep.
a little bit hit and miss. So you can
Mm,
get great development, but it
yep.
can be a little bit hit and miss depending on the company. Yeah, so don't. Yeah, so I think yes, but it needs to be the right company.
Yeah. And And I think a big part of that is, particularly for younger people wanting to get into the workforce, and maybe a startup is a good way for them to do that. I think to a degree, some of that has just got to be gut from them. Do they have some kind of connection, A, with the problem that you're trying to solve, or two, with the team that's interviewing you?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think having a some kind of passion connection to the
Mm,
topic, I think is great. Yeah, it's interesting. We've had a couple of actually one of the things that I find really energizing is, and it's been great in Thermal actually. We've got quite a young go-to-market team here, and
yep.
that's actually the. I think Lee and I are definitely the oldest in the office, so he's slightly older than me, so that's good. But no, but one of the things that I find energizing is, yeah, it's a young crew, right?
Yeah.
And they're early in their career journeys.
Mm,
They're contributing so much to us, and hopefully we are to them as well.
yeah.
And it's just the energy and yeah, just getting their perspective on what we're doing and the
Mm.
world and how they think about work and what they bring to the culture and to the environment. Yeah, it's that's actually a really interesting part I think about being in a startup.
Nice. And when you're so reliant on such a small team to deliver the things that you've all agreed on, maybe beginning of the week, and problems have come up from a customer and this needs fixing, or there's a bug in something, or a feature isn't going to go out when we've promised it. How do you build trust in those early stage teams where you give people enough space to do what they need to do, but set the boundaries and the guardrails?
I think I've always, and this applies, I think, whether it's startup or bigger. I think
Mhm.
you've got to empower people
Yep.
and you've got to have people's back. And
Yep.
I think even more so in startups, you've got to go, you know what, let me help you with that. And let me dive in. And I know you're really smashed. Can I help build the list for the next event that I know you need to do? Or can I help something that might be quite not your role? And
Yep.
it's okay, how can I help? How
Mm.
practically, because we're all in this together, this is
Yep.
not your role versus my role. Like, how can I make to how can I contribute? And I think if you have that mindset as a leader, I think that rubs off on the team too. So
Mm.
it's yeah, that's one thing I think is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think leading by example is still one of the biggest things that the leaders I think need to be aware of and remember
Yeah,
is the things you do and say rub off on your teams. I used to have this thing right of speaking to leaders and particularly people in their first leadership role, and they'd say, leadership isn't about me anymore, it's about the team. And I get that, but I also think that you set the standard, you set the
yeah, yeah.
tone through the way you act, the way you speak, the way you treat other people.
Yeah, but there's just nothing more powerful than digging in and helping someone out quietly.
Mhm.
Maybe only they know about it. Look,
Yep.
I think I can help there.
Mm.
Let me spend an hour, and I can probably unblock that for you.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe a hiring mistake that you've made in the past that maybe changed your approach to how you hire or build teams now?
Yeah, I think it. There's been plenty over the journey.
Yep.
Sorry, my light's just got out. Let me. There we go.
There you go.
With the light back again. Yeah, been plenty over the journey. I think it really comes down to having. What is sometimes hard to assess is you go, okay, here's the role, here's the culture, and here's what we need you to do. It's a big opportunity, but you're gonna have to be really hands-on, or yes, you come from here and you maybe need to do that. And you go, you up for it? And they go, yeah, I'm up for it. I really enjoy being hands-on. I'm really excited to be whatever, which is and easy to say, and they may or may not even believe it. They may actually believe it, but it's then how do you go, okay, how do I just try and make that real for someone? So the more person coming into the role really understands what the environment is, what it's going to take to be successful. I think the better sense of they will have as to whether
Yeah.
it's right for them as well. So I think that's probably one thing that I've changed a little bit. It's yes, you need to be selling when you're hiring, but I also think just try and be really honest and authentic and a little bit sometimes say to people, I'm not actually sure this is the right role for you. Like, it's easy. And because I think people also respect that as well as I'm just as someone who's seen a bit, like my instinct is for these reasons, this might not be right for you. What do you think? So
Yeah.
I think being able to have that conversation with people sometimes can be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think the anti-sell sometimes works really well. And I think being able
Yeah.
to frame that really well. An example might be, in our sales team here, we operate XYZ. So if you're someone who likes ABC, you may find this frustrating. You may find we move too slowly. There may not be enough detail for
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
sometimes really spelling it out clearly to people can make them stop and think. And sometimes if the day after they give you a call back or you get an email saying, hey, I've had to think about a
Yeah, good point.
conversation and you're
Good point.
right, it's not going to work. I think that, and I've seen multiple cases where leaders, because they're desperate to get somebody on board and they think that time is the thing that they shouldn't be flexible on, when really it's the fit. So
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
rush to get somebody on board, maybe they don't listen to the little nagging voice or the gut and they go, oh, they'll be fine. They hire the person anyway and it doesn't work out.
Yeah. The other thing I think that's hard about hiring is it's very rare that you have so you often have a role which is a bit ambiguous in scope.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and possibly I'd love them to do this, and gee, it'd be great if they could do that, and this, and then no one's going to be able to do that, right? So then
Mm.
you've got to go, you're often comparing candidates that have different profiles, different strengths, weaknesses, and there's
Yep.
no right or wrong answer, right? So they're just different. So
Yeah.
trying to come up with a framework as to how you assess what's really important in the role. I think
Mm.
particularly when you're hiring, when it's like in some ways, it's like a salary cap, right? In a football team, you're not going to hire, you just can't afford to hire and fill every spot with the perfect person.
Yeah.
That's just not the reality of startup life. So
Yeah.
it's really thinking through what are the things that are most important to me, and make sure I get a team that can deliver on that.
Yeah, perfect. Moving over to job seekers now, people are looking to join a
Mm.
startup. What for people considering joining an early stage business, what questions should they be asking founders before they join?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. One obvious one, which is quite hard to assess unless is okay. What you don't want to do is join a startup company that is actually doesn't have great doesn't have great product market fit,
Yep.
doesn't have good investor support, doesn't necessarily have access to funding, which is just going to mean that it's either either they're just not going to be able to grow very much, or they're just going to get a bit stuck. So that's not because you're investing in the potential of a company,
Mm, mm,
because your development is going to be very much tied to the growth and the opportunity
mm,
associated with the
mm,
company. So then you go, okay, as someone coming in, how do I assess that? And it can be
mm.
pretty hard. It's also the earlier it is, the harder it is to assess.
Yeah.
So one thing I think, one kind of frame I think I would have for a job seeker is to go, okay, where's the company at? Just familiarize yourself
Mm,
with, there's a bit of language around pre-seed, seed,
yeah.
product market fit. So just familiarize yourself with that kind of landscape. And then there's trade-offs, right? Being in the first 5 employees in a pre-seed has a very different risk profile to join a Series A team that's flying, right?
Yeah.
And both could be good and
Mm,
interesting in different ways, but you've got to be really clear about what you want, because
mm,
while they're both startups, they're very different environments, right?
yeah.
So I think probably many job seekers wouldn't necessarily understand that, I
Mm,
think.
yeah.
So I think thinking through how you validate slash, assess the kind of the opportunity, the
Mm,
trajectory of the company is really important. And that comes down to, I think, you just talk to people, ask people who's investing in them, who are the founders, what sort of reputations do they have, what do they
Yeah.
like, what have they done
Mm.
before, who else has put their reputation on the line for this
Yep.
business. So I think they're good things to. Do you
Yeah.
like them? Do you
Yeah.
like them? So,
Good place to start.
no, like in all seriousness, do you like them?
Yep.
Does it feel good? Does it excite you? Does it make you want to get out of bed in the morning? So,
Yeah. Tips for people listening. The Startup Hiring website will have a PDF that's free that describes all the different stages,
there you go.
pre-seed, seed, Series A,
You didn't even
where
tell me to say that.
where you can start mapping out your own risk profile and understanding
Yeah,
what's going to work for you.
what a good idea, son.
Who'd have thunk it? And that's great advice. I think there is a language around, particularly in the B2B
Mm.
SaaS world, that people should probably familiarize themselves with. I think
And,
things like
and
TAM, the total addressable market,
yeah,
like how big is your market? How soon
yeah,
until you realize that? These are all good questions to
yeah.
ask.
No, and it's not as intimidating as you think it is.
No,
So,
no.
probably the other bit of advice I would always give is, and I'm sure you've had this in your career and I've had it, people are always really generous with their time. If
Yep.
you're particularly when you're early in your career journey, so
Mm,
don't be
mm,
afraid to go. There's probably someone in your network who you know well enough,
yep.
or you can get introduced to. Say, hey, I'm thinking about this. I just love your guidance, input on how your perspective on it. And you don't necessarily have to agree with everything they
Yep.
say, but if you can speak to two or three people and
Mm,
go, hey, I'm looking at this, what do you think about it? And they might, and you might get two or three different views, but it's just don't be afraid to ask people, because particularly if you're early in your journey, people always want to help,
yep.
always.
Yep.
So, because
Uh,
people have helped them on the journey. So,
Absolutely. And I think it's a great point. And I think people are far more willing to help than we probably give them credit for. And I'm
yeah,
talking like in the whole, people
and
will help.
particularly if you frame it as, look, I just love your advice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, can I just grab 15 minutes? Just love your perspective on it.
Mm,
I think it'd be really helpful for me. So,
yeah.
just frame it as 15 minutes, just
Mm,
want your advice.
mm.
People generally, in my experience, always willing to help.
Yeah. Another tip for people listening who are looking for roles as well. Most of the VC firms now have some kind of talent person
Yeah.
who's looking out for talent for the portfolio of companies. So finding those people, find them on LinkedIn. We'll probably have a list of them somewhere. Is another good entry point as well. Um, f- for leadership, then, just going back to leadership, as a company grows, how does the leadership you need change? And how do you spot when maybe someone won't scale to that next stage?
Yeah, how's leadership changed? I think so. I think one kind of obvious thing is you become a bit more functional.
Yep.
As a example, at the moment, collectively, I'm the firm or finance department. So that won't scale.
Mm,
So there's going to come a point where
yeah.
that doesn't work. So
Yep.
because I just don't have the skills and experience
Mm,
to keep doing it. So which and where I'm going with that, I guess, is over time you need to get people who have deep experience or deeper experience in particular functions. That
yep.
might be in marketing. You suddenly go, actually, we've got a generalized marketer, and now we need someone who's really deep in this. In digital or
Mm,
whatever it
mm,
is,
mm,
or suddenly we need someone who's got some expertise in partnerships from a sales perspective,
yeah.
or we actually need a financial controller or
Mm,
whatever it is. So you definitely, there's points at which you need to bring in functional expertise. I think but then there's a lot of roles where it's not really about deep functional expertise, say sales or customer
mm,
support. So I guess thinking about the question, what stops people from scaling in those roles?
yep.
So I think it's a couple of things. One is it's just that ability to grow and manage teams, lead
Hmm.
teams. Like that's just hard, right? And I think we're all better leaders having done it a few times. Doesn't
Yep.
mean you can't be a good leader to start with, but there's just it's one of those things that you kind of learn by doing a little bit.
Yep.
And so and some people, people's readiness to do that, I think,
Mm,
can be different. So that's one area. I think a second area is an ability for people to be able to think more broadly about the business and a little bit strategically.
yep.
So often in a start, you're so busy doing, the people who struggle to grow with the business are those that can't get out of their own little world for whatever it is.
Hmm.
They're in that own little world, but
Yep.
you've just got to, how can you be thinking about more strategic things, working on the business rather than
Hmm.
just working in the business,
Yep.
just set of stuff around able just to contribute at that kind of more senior level. So that's probably a second thing. And sometimes probably the two things I think would say that most play out.
Yep.
Uh,
Brilliant.
it's hard. It's really
Mm,
hard to bring new people into
mm,
a business though. So
yeah.
that has its own risks. So I always, my philosophy is I'd much rather give, if someone has good self-awareness about where they need to develop,
Hmm.
and you have the ability to support them a little bit, and you think they've got the toolkit to learn and develop, then you should give them a shot.
Yeah.
So, like, your chances of success doing that are far more than often bringing in someone fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about you a little bit. I know you don't like talking about yourself, but how do you personally handle, I guess, the pressures of hiring, fundraising, scaling, customers, all these things happening at once? And I guess the following from there is, are there any sort of habits that you found have worked really well for you that others could learn from?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually a topic that I don't think gets talked about enough. Like,
Mm.
it is hard, and I think growing and scaling businesses is not easy. I think it takes a lot of emotional energy.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I learned on the journey is how you manage that. And at
Mm.
times in my journey, I haven't managed it very well. So it's just thinking through how you do that a little bit.
Mm.
And someone once said to me, the hardest thing you'll ever learn is, one of my early managers actually said, the hardest thing you'll ever learn is how to manage yourself. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
what else are you talking about? When you have, someone says something to you, go, what else are you talking about?
Mm.
What do you
Mm.
know? And then you realize what they meant about 10 years later.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing that you've got to learn how to manage yourself a little bit. You have to learn, you know, what it is that allows you to keep perspective in your life.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different things that people do. Like, whether it's like trying to get out for a run, maybe a slow jog, more in my case, just doing that, just
Yeah.
whatever it is, having people around you. One of the things that I find really important is having a social circle or a group of things that I do where people don't care what my profession is.
Yeah.
So, coach, I've always coached my girls in footy, and you go down and you got a bunch of 11-year-old girls. They don't care what you do.
Yeah.
They don't care that you may or may not hit the next fundraising round. They don't care that you might be about to sell a billion-dollar company. They don't care.
Yeah.
And quite rightly, they don't care.
Mm.
They're in the moment. And I find that really helpful
Yeah.
because it just keeps perspective. And everyone's got a different, I think everyone will think about that a little bit differently. But I think
Mm. Mm.
I try to keep a little bit of perspective on life. I
Yeah.
think the other thing that I really find is it's just nice to be on the journey with other people. Here at Firma, we've got a great founding team. So that just makes it, A, it's more fun,
Mm.
B, you share the load. I think a stress between, if you two people sharing a stress, I think it's more than half. It's like quartered, I reckon. I don't know
Yeah.
what the maths is, but you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's
Mm.
kind of, you just feel much lighter if you're sharing something, I
Yeah.
think. So that's, anyway, it's a bit of a personal thing, but there's some of
Mm.
my philosophies on it. So,
Yeah, I love it. It's so easy for us to all get caught up in our own whirlwind of raising and hiring
yeah,
and
yeah,
work. And because you're so emotionally invested in it,
complete.
there's a risk it becomes your whole life. But to
Oh,
everybody else, you're boring.
yeah, exactly, exactly. 100%, 100%. Yes, yes. But yeah, always remember you're not as interesting as you think you are. So,
That's it. Looking ahead then, what's one trend? You've already mentioned a little bit. What's one trend that you think will fundamentally change how startups hire and maybe build teams over the coming years?
yeah, and look, in this, I'm not Robinson Crusoe here, but it's
No.
clearly AI, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I think as a general, it's just the more you get into it,
Mm.
I think the world is going. Sorry, what's the best way to frame this a little bit? I, AI is going to impact every role,
Yeah.
and I think AI is going to impact every organisation. So startups, particularly, are on the forefront of how do you use AI most effectively.
Yeah.
And the way I think about an AI, it's an enabler, and you. That's also going to be fundamental to how you build business
Mm.
processes, how you build businesses. Like,
Mm.
if you think about the engine that is a business, AI in multiple different ways is going to be
Mm.
deeply embedded in it.
Mm.
But we're at this period, I think, of real discontinuity in how businesses, systems, functions
Mm.
run. Whether you're an accountant or a customer support rep or a salesperson,
Mm. Mm.
your world is changing rapidly.
Yeah.
So I think the number one thing that I think about it for me, really, how do I make sure that I am adapting slash leveraging, really taking advantage of what's out there to make
Yeah.
me a better leader, us a better
Mm.
company. So when you think about the attributes of people coming into an organization, it's people who are curious, who are AI native,
Mhm.
who can build things and know how to utilize things. Listening to podcasts in the morning, so every day I sit down and I think, what are the tasks that I've got ahead of me on the day? And I go, okay, rather than doing that, could I spend an hour doing some work and setting up an AI prompt so that when I had to do that same task next week, it'd
Mm.
be take me a quarter of the time. And I think, and then there's this kind of the people who go, how could I do that differently? How can I do
Mm,
that more efficiently?
mm.
What can I leverage? What tools, technology? I think we're at a moment in time where and that's always been important, but I just think
Yeah,
now it's so important.
yeah.
So,
I think I agree, and I think the world of AI and the power of the latest model releases has changed so much that a year ago, people were saying to me things like, "We want to use AI to do the highly repetitive, low value
mm,
work." Now they're saying, "We want to use AI to do the high value, really repetitive work as well."
yeah,
To
100%.
to do the meat of the work, to do 80, get it to 80%, and then we'll have a human work through the
I
rest of it.
just think people who can architect AI systems,
Yep.
like that is going to be a skill set.
Mm,
Oh, seriously, if you
mm,
are
mm.
like that is going to be a skill set. I think you're going to find smaller and smaller starting teams, which are going to
Yep.
have more and more leverage.
Mm.
So
I don't know if you remember that a while ago, the business analyst was one of the key
yeah,
roles.
yeah, yeah.
As tech systems grew and the power to connect multiple systems on a customer journey or whatever it might be grew, the business analysts back in the day who could map out a customer journey,
Mm,
identify where the gaps were, and get systems connecting. Almost that kind of thinking again, I
yep,
think is going to be where the people who, as you call them, AI natives, can really make a difference.
yeah.
Map out what the problem is, what is AI solving for us, and now we can go from here to here incredibly
And a
quickly.
little bit of proof of concept, be able to
Yep.
build stuff,
Yep.
and it's at one level, I think you can go, oh, gee, that's scary. But actually, if you're a young, entering the workforce, young graduate, it is just such a big opportunity because you're going to know as much
Mm,
about this
mm,
as someone who's been in that business for 10 years. Like, so it's actually, I think it's a real opportunity.
mm,
So for
mm.
people,
I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and they were about the job market and bemoaning the lack of roles and the lack of opportunity. And I was being more of a shoulder to cry on than anything else. But I came off that call thinking to myself, I actually think the reverse. I think we're actually living in a real time of abundance. Yes, the
yeah,
world is a strange place at the moment, but there's so much. One, there's so much investment in startups in Australia at the moment, which means
100%.
there's going to be more opportunity for companies and individuals, but also the abundance of thinking around AI and how to solve problems there. If you're someone who is of that ilk, then you will have a whole plethora of opportunities.
Yeah, no, 100% agree.
Brilliant. Paul, this has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your
Yeah, it's been
time.
fun. Yeah,
Um,
good chat.
we
Good to
got there.
chat.
Um,
Someone listens to it. So,
who
but
knows? Time will tell.
if not, I've enjoyed chatting.
If people want to connect with you, you're open to
Yeah, 100%,
invitations on
100%. Yeah,
LinkedIn.
just ping you on LinkedIn. So
Beautiful. Paul Perrett, thank you so much for your time.
no worries. See you, son.
Cheers.